The galaxy was a vast, ever-changing expanse, full of strange, unknown wonders. Among the stars, humanity had carved out its place, known for its resilience, ingenuity, and unwavering ambition. No challenge was too great, no frontier too distant. Human explorers had long ventured beyond their home planet, establishing colonies and forging alliances with alien species. But their greatest test was yet to come, and it would not come from a rival civilization or a deadly weapon, but from an ancient, forgotten relic, a force beyond their comprehension. The Vorloth, a species far older than humanity, had watched their rise with quiet concern. Their culture was one of caution, steeped in a history of knowledge passed down through millennia. The Vorloth were masters of technology, their ships capable of traveling across the vast stretches of space at unimaginable speeds. Yet their most dangerous power was their deep understanding of the ancient artifacts scattered throughout the galaxy. These relics, powerful, enigmatic, and deadly, held the key to unimaginable forces, and the core of fire was one such relic. It was on the edge of the known universe, deep in an uncharted region, that the humans had stumbled upon it. The core was not just a relic, it was a power source of unimaginable magnitude, capable of manipulating energy on a planetary scale. To most, it was the holy grail of technology, a tool to revolutionize humanity's existence. But to the Vorloth, it was a weapon, a force so dangerous that even they dared not disturb it. An emissary from the Vorloth arrived on Earth, a sleek, silver-skinned figure cloaked in the deep knowledge of countless suns. He stood before the United Nations, his presence calm but filled with an air of warning. His words were measured, each one spoken with a quiet gravity. "You are not ready," he said, his voice reverberating through the assembly hall. "The core of fire is a force that cannot be controlled. It is a power older than your civilization, one that has destroyed worlds. I beg you, leave it untouched." The room was silent, the weight of his warning heavy in the air. But as he spoke, the human leaders exchanged glances. Ambition flickered in their eyes. The potential of the core was undeniable. Their technology, though advanced, could only dream of matching the power the relic promised. What if they could harness it? They would become the dominant species in the galaxy. "Thank you for your concern," said President Elizabeth Kane, her tone firm. "But humanity will decide its own future. We will proceed with the expedition." The Vorloth emissary's eyes narrowed, but he made no further protest. He knew the futility of warning a species too consumed by its own ambition. As he turned to leave, he left behind a final plea. "Remember, some powers are not meant to be wielded." Humanity did not listen. The expedition was launched within weeks. A fleet of human ships, equipped with the most advanced technology, set course for the distant world where the core of fire lay dormant. The Vorloth, with their wisdom and knowledge, watched from the shadows, knowing that there was little they could do to stop the inevitable. The fate of the human expedition was sealed the moment they dismissed the warning. As the fleet jumped into the vast expanse of space, a sense of destiny hung in the air. Humanity had just made its most dangerous gamble yet, and the universe would soon know the consequences. The journey to the distant planet was long and grueling, but the crew of the human expedition remained steadfast. They were a diverse group: scientists, engineers, soldiers, and explorers, united by the same purpose: to claim the core of fire and unlock the untold potential it held. The planet, a barren rock orbiting a dying star, had been surveyed remotely, its ruins a mysterious enigma that drew them like moths to a flame. As their ships descended through the atmosphere, the sight of the ancient ruins stirred a sense of awe in the crew. Towering spires of stone, long abandoned and weathered by centuries, loomed over the landscape. The relic was hidden deep within a massive temple at the heart of the ruins, a structure that appeared both majestic and foreboding. The ground trembled slightly as the ship's landing gear hit the dust of the planet, the echoes of an ancient power long dormant. Lead scientist Dr. Laura Hayes stood at the edge of the landing platform, scanning the surroundings with a mix of wonder and caution. "There it is," she muttered, her voice tinged with excitement. The core of fire. The team deployed quickly, setting up a perimeter around the landing zone. The remnants of an ancient civilization were all around them, relics of a people long gone. But it was the core that drew their attention. The artifact was housed in a massive chamber deep within the temple. The walls of the structure were inscribed with strange symbols, and the air inside hummed with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. It was as if the planet itself was alive, breathing in sync with the power that pulsed from the heart of the temple. The core itself was nothing short of mesmerizing. A spherical object, glowing with an intense, fiery light, it hovered in the center of a stone pedestal. It radiated energy, its power unmistakable. To the human eyes that gazed upon it, the potential was overwhelming. "Activate it," Dr. Hayes ordered, her voice steady despite the growing tension. One of the engineers, Marcus, approached the pedestal, his hands trembling as he connected his equipment to the relic. The moment his fingers brushed the surface of the core, a sharp hum filled the room. The walls trembled, the air crackled with static, and then, with a sudden burst, the relic pulsed to life. It was a deafening roar, a sound like the planet itself was waking up. The ground beneath their feet shook violently, throwing some of the crew off balance. A blinding light surged from the core, illuminating the entire temple with a fiery glow that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. "What the hell is happening?" shouted Marcus, his voice panicked as he stumbled back from the pedestal. Before anyone could react, the tremors escalated. The structure above them began to collapse. Stones rained down from the ceiling, and the entire temple seemed to shift. It wasn't just the room. Outside, the planet itself began to stir, volcanic eruptions bursting from the surface, sending rivers of lava flowing across the landscape. The sky turned blood red, and an unnatural wind howled across the barren world. "We need to get out of here," Dr. Hayes screamed, her calm demeanor shattered by the unfolding chaos. But it was already too late. The relic had awakened something far beyond their control. The ground split open, sending shockwaves through the planet's crust. The power of the core was far more destructive than they had ever anticipated. It was no longer a source of energy to be harnessed. It was an extinction event waiting to happen. As the team scrambled to evacuate, the realization hit them all at once. The Vorloth had been right. They had unleashed something far too powerful. And now, there was no turning back. The air inside the temple was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning stone. As the human expedition team scrambled to escape the collapsing ruins, the once quiet world outside had erupted into chaos. The core of fire, now fully activated, sent waves of destructive energy rippling through the planet, triggering violent tremors, volcanic eruptions, and unnatural weather patterns. The ground beneath their feet cracked and heaved as if the planet itself was alive, reacting to the power that had been disturbed. "We need to move, now," Dr. Hayes shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. The team raced back toward the ship, the narrow corridors of the temple barely wide enough to allow them all to pass. The rumblings of the planet's core were deafening, and the once magnificent structure that had stood for millennia was crumbling into dust. Pieces of stone and metal rained down from the ceiling, forcing the group to dodge debris and navigate through growing cracks in the floor. "How much time do we have?" asked Lieutenant James Burke, one of the soldiers, as he carried a piece of damaged equipment. His face was grim, but his focus remained unwavering. "We don't know," Dr. Hayes responded, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and dread. "The core's energy output is off the charts. The whole planet is destabilizing. We may have minutes, maybe hours." As they emerged from the temple, the sight of the world around them was nothing short of apocalyptic. The sky had turned a deep crimson, swirling with fiery clouds. Massive plumes of ash and smoke poured from the mountains, and the ground itself seemed to be tearing apart. The planet's surface was slowly being consumed by the devastation, and the distant horizon glowed with the orange light of fires spreading across the barren landscape. "Get to the ships," Dr. Hayes ordered, her voice cracking with fear. Now, the team sprinted toward the landing zone, where their ships had been parked. Their once pristine vessels now looked small and insignificant against the cataclysmic backdrop. Several of the ships had already taken off, their crew too eager to escape the encroaching destruction, but the remaining vehicles stood vulnerable, waiting for the team to return. As they reached the ships, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. A crack appeared in the earth, widening with terrifying speed. The crew hesitated for a split second, but it was enough to send a massive shockwave tearing through the area. The blast sent several crew members tumbling to the ground, their bodies crashing against the rocky surface. "Is everyone all right?" Dr. Hayes shouted, her heart racing. "Mostly," Burke responded, pulling himself to his feet and checking the others. "But we're not going to make it off the planet if this keeps up." With no time to waste, the team scrambled into the ships. As the engines roared to life, the sky above them seemed to boil with energy. The moment the ships lifted off, a blinding flash erupted from the planet's surface. A massive shockwave rippled through the air, rocking the ships as they ascended into orbit. "Status report," Dr. Hayes demanded as they climbed higher, looking out at the chaos unfolding below. "We're clear of the atmosphere," one of the engineers said, his voice tense. "But the planet's core, it's collapsing. It's not just destabilizing anymore. It's tearing itself apart." Dr. Hayes' heart sank as she glanced at the fading image of their homeworld below. The planet was no longer a place of life. It was a world in its death throes. Just then, an incoming transmission crackled through the ship's communication system. The voice on the other end was unmistakable, an emergency distress call from Earth. "This is Earth Command to the expedition team. What is your status? What the hell happened down there?" The words felt like a slap, but before Dr. Hayes could answer, the voice of the Vorlov echoed in her mind, warning them about the very destruction they were now witnessing. The Vorlov had been right. Humanity's greed had triggered something unstoppable. And now, their world was burning. The ships soared through the turbulent atmosphere, their engines straining against the planetary shockwaves that grew ever stronger with each passing minute. Inside, the crew was silent, each person lost in their own thoughts as they watched the planet, humanity's home, disintegrate below them. The walls of the ship groaned under the pressure, and the viewports display a horrifying sight. Mountains crumbling into the sea of fire, oceans evaporating under the relentless heat, and the sky ablaze with streaks of lightning and volcanic eruptions. The planet's surface was unraveling, its destruction inevitable. "We're not going to make it out of here," whispered Lieutenant Burke, his voice low and filled with dread. His hands gripped the seat in front of him, knuckles white, as the ship rocked violently. The crew had barely managed to get airborne, and now they were being tossed about like toys in the hands of a giant. "Don't talk like that," Dr. Hayes snapped, her focus on the controls. "We're not giving up. We get to the fleet, and we figure this out." The ship's comms crackled to life, and the voice of the mission commander, Captain John Harris, filled the cabin. "This is Captain Harris. All ships are on a course for the rendezvous point. We need to stay together. Once we get to the fleet, we'll assess the situation. Don't panic, people." But Dr. Hayes could sense the uncertainty in his tone. They all knew it was too late to prevent the catastrophe. Their homeworld was gone, nothing more than a memory in the span of a few short hours. The question now was whether they could survive. As the fleet gathered in orbit, they were met by the flashing lights of emergency protocols and the distant hum of Vorlov ships. It had been only days since the Vorlov had warned them, yet now they were the only hope the humans had left. The alien fleet, sleek and elegant, appeared like ghostly sentinels in the void, their silent presence a reminder of humanity's reckless pursuit of power. "Welcome aboard," a voice came through the comm system, and Dr. Hayes recognized it as a Vorlith commander, an individual she had seen only once during the initial meeting. You were warned, but now you must listen. We can help, but you must abandon your obsession with the core. The human's hesitation was palpable. Some of the crew members shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the distant horizon of space, where their dying world still burned in a way that felt surreal. Others, particularly the military personnel, refused to consider the Vorloth's aid. After all, they had only just made it out of the planetary wreckage. They weren't ready to bow to an alien species, especially not now, when there was still the faintest hope that humanity could recover from this. We can still salvage the situation, one of the engineers argued, a young man named Thomas. We have the technology. If we can get our hands on the core again, reverse the energy flow, we might be able to stabilize it. Do you even hear yourself? Burke snapped, his voice full of frustration. We've already seen what happens when you try to control that thing. It's too powerful. And it's not going to let us fix it. Dr. Hayes took a deep breath, trying to clear her mind. Her scientific training screamed that they should keep exploring the possibility of saving what they could. Yet, deep down, she knew the truth. The relic had been too much. Humanity had unleashed something it could not control, and now their homeworld was paying the price. We have to get to safety first, she said finally. We need to stabilize ourselves before we even think about what comes next. The Vorloth's fleet provided immediate refuge, but it came with conditions. The crew was allowed aboard their ships, but the Vorloth commander made it clear that they could not keep the core, nor could they try to reverse what had already been set in motion. The alien ships would provide only a temporary sanctuary. As the crew began transferring to the Vorloth ships, Dr. Hayes stood at the viewport of their temporary refuge, watching the last remnants of Earth vanish into the void. She could not shake the haunting image of her planet being consumed by flames. And now, they were nothing more than survivors in a galaxy that would never look at them the same again. The survivors of the expedition floated in the cold, empty void of space, their new refuge nestled among the gleaming ships of the Vorloth. The fleet had assembled quickly, the advanced alien vessels easily dwarfing the remaining human ships. Yet, despite the aid, the atmosphere among the human survivors was one of silence, dread, and sorrow. Their homeworld was gone, swallowed by the very power they had sought to control. The loss was overwhelming, and the reality of their situation settled in like a cold weight upon their shoulders. Captain Harris stood before his crew, his expression grim. The Vorloth had offered them sanctuary, but there was little comfort to be found in their sleek, silent ships. The once proud human fleet now seemed like a ragtag group of survivors, their futures uncertain. "We've made it this far," he said quietly, though his words lacked the usual strength of command. "We still have a chance to rebuild, but we can't do it alone. We have to rely on our allies and accept the help the Vorloth are offering." There was an uneasy murmur among the crew. Trust in the Vorloth was still fragile. The species had saved them from the catastrophic destruction of their homeworld, but how much could they truly trust an alien race that had warned them of the danger yet offered no direct intervention until the planet was on the brink of collapse? Dr. Hayes stood beside Captain Harris, her eyes fixed on the fleet of Vorloth ships. "The truth is, we've been given a second chance, but we can't waste it." Her voice was steady, though the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. "We need to figure out where we go from here, what we can salvage. We need a plan, not just to survive, but to ensure that humanity's legacy isn't one of reckless ambition." Her words resonated with some, but not all. Lieutenant Burke, ever the pragmatist, crossed his arms and looked out into the vast expanse of space. "What's the point of legacy?" he muttered, his voice tinged with bitterness. "We're survivors. That's all we are now. There's nothing left of Earth to rebuild, no home to return to." The tension in the room was palpable, but Dr. Hayes refused to let it overpower her. She had seen human resilience in the face of unimaginable odds, and now was no different. "There's always something left," she said firmly. As long as we have the will to fight, humanity can rebuild anywhere. We may not have Earth, but we still have each other. With the emergency evacuation complete, the Vorlov began to escort the fleet to their new destination. A massive orbiting station far from the wreckage of Earth, in a region of space where they would be safe from any immediate threats. The station, known as Aeon, was a neutral hub used by several species across the galaxy. It was a symbol of unity, a place where rival civilizations coexisted for trade, diplomacy, and learning. The Vorlov had offered it as a safe haven, a place where the humans could rest, regroup, and begin the painful process of rebuilding. The journey took several weeks. The human fleet traveled in solemn silence, the crew focused on the task at hand, but haunted by the void they left behind. It wasn't just the loss of their planet that gnawed at them. It was the fear that, in their pursuit of knowledge and power, they had lost their way. Could they ever redeem themselves in the eyes of the galaxy? Could humanity rise from the ashes of its past mistakes? As they approached Aeon, the sight of the massive space station brought no comfort. It was a technological marvel, a monument to peace and cooperation, yet it felt like a reminder of everything humanity had sacrificed. No longer would they be masters of their own destiny. Their future was now tied to the decisions of the Vorlov and other alien races who would determine their place in the galaxy. Inside the station, however, there was something more than just a sanctuary. It was a place of new beginnings, where old wounds could begin to heal. And perhaps for the first time, humanity would have to face the consequences of its own hubris and learn to rebuild not just their civilization, but their very spirit. The station Aeon loomed ahead like a beacon of hope in the cold emptiness of space. It was a place of diplomacy, of alliances forged and broken, a neutral ground where species of all kinds could coexist, trade, and communicate. For humanity, it had become their last refuge, one that would shelter them as they tried to rebuild. The once proud ships of Earth, battered and broken from the destruction of their homeworld, now floated alongside the sleek, imposing vessels of the Vorlov. The human fleet was docked at the far side of the station, its survivors now adjusting to their new reality. The few remaining engineers worked to repair the damaged ships, while others simply wandered the sterile halls of Aeon, aimless and lost. The loss of Earth was still too fresh, and the weight of that void hung over them all. Dr. Laura Hayes paced the observation deck, gazing out at the stars, her thoughts far away. The other survivors had taken to their tasks, but she knew the heart of the matter was something deeper, a question that no one was brave enough to ask. Could humanity truly rebuild after the devastation they had caused? Could they ever live up to the legacy of their homeworld? Or were they forever doomed to be defined by their own hubris? I didn't think it would feel like this. Lieutenant Burke's voice broke through her thoughts. She hadn't heard him approach, and his words felt heavy, burdened with a sadness that was hard to ignore. Dr. Hayes turned to face him, her expression softening. "What do you mean?" Burke gestured toward the station's vast windows, where distant ships drifted through the void. "I thought we'd be different, that we'd learn from our mistakes. But now, we're nothing more than refugees in someone else's galaxy, a shadow of what we once were." Dr. Hayes looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Maybe that's true. But we're still here, Burke. We still have a chance. We didn't get wiped out with Earth. That counts for something." "But at what cost?" he asked bitterly, his voice tinged with anger. "Look at us. Look at what we've become. We didn't just lose a planet. We lost our purpose, our identity. We're running from our mistakes, and I don't know if we'll ever be able to escape them." His words stung more than she cared to admit. There was truth in them. Humanity had once been on the path to greatness, a species that was about to conquer the stars. But in their haste, their hunger for power, they had unleashed a force they couldn't control. And now the price of survival was a lifetime of uncertainty. Before Dr. Hayes could respond, a sharp beep echoed from the comm station across the room. A message, incoming and marked urgent. The tone was official. This was not a drill or routine communication. The crew moved quickly, gathering around as the screen flickered to life. "This is Commander Valcor of the Vorlith fleet," came the voice over the comms, firm and resolute. "We have intercepted communications from a nearby sector. There are reports of a new threat approaching, one that could jeopardize the fragile peace that is currently being negotiated across the galaxy. It appears that the destruction of your world has drawn the attention of other factions. Be prepared." The room fell silent. The weight of the words settled over them all, heavier than anything they had experienced so far. Another threat. The destruction of Earth had barely begun to sink in, and now humanity was faced with a new danger, one that might not be theirs to stop. "Prepare for what?" Captain Harris' voice was tight with concern. "What's coming?" "An enemy unlike any you've faced," Valcor replied, his tone solemn. "We believe the ones responsible for the recent attack are not far behind. They are a force of destruction." Dr. Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. Earth had fallen. Their homeworld, their birthplace, had burned in the fires of their own ambition. Now, the galaxy was awakening to the consequences of that ambition. The next chapter of their survival would not be one of rebuilding, but of defense. And for humanity, this was only the beginning. The atmosphere aboard Aeon had shifted. What was once a place of refuge now hummed with tension and uncertainty. Humanity, still reeling from the loss of Earth, was being thrust into a new battle for survival. The Vorlith had been kind enough to offer shelter, but their warning was clear. The galaxy was not a place of safety, and the enemies they had unknowingly provoked were closing in fast. The crew assembled in the central briefing room, the massive holographic map flickering to life above the table. Captain Harris stood at the head, his expression strained, as the data streams from the Vorlith fleet scrolled across the projection. "Enemy ships are closing in," Commander Valcor's voice echoed through the room, his image materializing on the screen. "Their trajectory suggests they are on a direct course to Aeon. We believe this is the force that has been ravaging neutral territories for some time, though their true identity remains unknown." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the human crew. They had already lost everything. Now they were facing an unknown enemy, one that had the strength to wipe out entire civilizations without warning. It was a harsh reality, one that made the loss of Earth seem almost trivial by comparison. "What do we know about them?" Lieutenant Burke's voice was sharp, cutting through the unease. His eyes never left the screen, scanning the alien intelligence reports with growing concern. "Their fleet is unlike any we've encountered," Valcor continued, his expression unreadable. "Highly advanced, heavily armed, and aggressive. They've laid waste to entire star systems in the past, leaving no survivors. They are a race of conquerors, nomadic, but relentless. Their ships are designed to overwhelm, to destroy before negotiating." Dr. Hayes frowned. "A conquering race. How is it that we haven't encountered them before? How did they remain hidden for so long?" "We do not know," Valcor answered solemnly. "But they are no longer content with their remote operations. They have set their sights on this region of space, and with the destruction of Earth, their path has become clear." The room grew heavy with the weight of the revelation. Humanity's hubris, their reckless pursuit of power, had already brought them to the edge of extinction. And now, the destruction of their planet had stirred the attention of a force that cared nothing for alliances, for peace, or for the survival of those who lived in their way. "The question is, how do we defend ourselves?" Captain Harris finally asked. His voice was tight, but his leadership was unwavering. "We barely survived Earth's destruction. Now we face a force that might be even more dangerous. We need a plan." Valcor's image flickered again, but his tone was resolute. "You must prepare your people for war. We will not leave you unprotected, but your chances of survival depend on how quickly you mobilize. We have sent word to our allies in the region, but we cannot guarantee reinforcements in time. You must act swiftly." The human crew exchanged uneasy glances. It was one thing to rebuild, to regroup after a tragedy. But it was another to face an existential threat head-on, knowing that the galaxy itself was a vast, uncaring wilderness. Humanity had barely begun to understand its place in this new reality, and already they were on the cusp of war. "We'll need to train, to organize," Dr. Hayes said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about fighting for what's left of us. We can't afford to make the same mistakes again. We need to be united, or we'll fall apart like we did before." Captain Harris nodded, his gaze fixed on the holographic map of the approaching enemy fleet. "Then it's time to prepare. Everyone, gear up. We'll make a stand, or we'll die trying." As the crew dispersed, each person weighed the gravity of their situation. The storm was coming, and there was no running from it. The universe had already shown them the cost of recklessness. Now they had to show that humanity was more than just a warning. It was a force to be reckoned with. And if they were to survive, they would have to fight for every last inch. The tension on Aeon had reached a breaking point. The entire station thrummed with activity as the crew and Vorlov alike prepared for the inevitable battle. Humanity had already lost everything. Earth, their way of life, their future. But now, they had one last chance to fight back, to prove that they were more than the sum of their mistakes. In the war rooms, Captain Harris and Dr. Hayes strategized with Valcor, the Vorlov commander. The holographic map of the approaching enemy fleet flickered ominously on the table, its growing mass a constant reminder of the threat bearing down on them. The enemy ships were unlike anything the humans had faced before. Massive, heavily armed, and relentless. Each moment brought them closer to a confrontation that could very well end humanity's already tenuous existence. "We've got one shot at this," Captain Harris said, his voice cold with determination. "If we don't hold them here, we won't just lose Aeon. We'll lose everything. The Vorlov are our allies, but their resources are limited. We can't rely on them alone." "We won't," Dr. Hayes replied firmly. "We'll have to use everything we have. Technology, tactics, and most importantly, human ingenuity. We're down, but we're not out." The human fleet had managed to repair what little they had left after the destruction of Earth, but it was a ragtag collection of ships, no match for the enemy's overwhelming numbers. Yet the desperation of their situation gave them something powerful: the will to fight. The Vorlov had shared their advanced technology, and with the combined efforts of both species, they had devised a plan. They would use Aeon as a decoy, drawing the enemy's ships into a trap. Meanwhile, the human fleet would flank and attack with every ounce of their remaining strength. It was a risky strategy, one that hinged on a single fact: the enemy underestimated humanity. As the final preparations were made, Dr. Hayes stood in the command center, watching the crew prepare for the worst. Some were ready, their faces set in grim determination. Others, like Burke, looked weary, but no less resolved. They had been through hell already. This, however, was different. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for redemption. Burke caught her eye as he checked his equipment. "You think we can do this?" he asked, his voice low. She met his gaze, her expression hardening. "We have to. There's no other option." The silence that followed was heavy. It was a silence born of uncertainty, but also of fierce resolve. Humanity had been on the brink of extinction before, and time and again, they had clawed their way back. This battle would be no different. Hours later, the fleet was in position. Aeon hung like a beacon in the void, its massive hull reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The enemy was close now, too close. The first waves of their ships appeared in the distance, their monstrous forms filling the viewports of the human fleet. Captain Harris stood at the helm, his voice steady as he issued orders. "All ships, prepare for battle. We hold nothing back. Engage on my mark." The Vorlov fleet moved into position beside the humans, their ships sleek and silent, but their weapons poised for destruction. It was a strange alliance. Two species, once separated by vast distances and ideologies, now bound by a common enemy. As the enemy fleet surged forward, the trap was set into motion. Aeon drew their fire, the massive station absorbing the first wave of the assault. Meanwhile, the human and Vorlov ships circled behind, launching a barrage of missiles and energy blasts that tore through the enemy's formation. The battle was chaotic. The stars lit up with flashes of fire and light. Humanity fought with everything they had, each ship a testament to their survival instinct. The enemy retaliated with brutal force, but the humans were not just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for the future, for the chance to rebuild, and for the hope that their mistakes could be overcome. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Hayes stood at the command center, her heart pounding as she watched the battle unfold. They were winning. Against all odds, they were winning. But the war was far from over. "Keep fighting," she whispered to herself, watching as the human fleet struck down the enemy forces, their courage and resilience shining brighter than ever before. "We won't be forgotten. Not today." The final blow came when the human fleet managed to take down the enemy's flagship, their ultimate weapon. It was a hard-won victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Humanity had faced the darkness and emerged stronger.